Rachel.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome back to Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
This week we'll be going over my coverage of Thomas Massie's Epstein resolution, Rachel's coverage of the DC federalization, and then how Republicans are rebranding their big, beautiful bill. After that, we'll have an interview with Congresswoman Becca Balint, and then we'll answer questions about our life on the Hill.
Welcome back, everyone. We are really excited to be chatting again about so much that's been happening on the Hill last week, this week. Yes, there's going to be so much happening this month in general, and we are here to bring it all to you. And so I think the biggest thing that happened last week and the thing that's going to continue this week and the weeks after is the Jeffrey Epstein files. Basically, right now, Republicans are in this, I think, just really
standstill, honestly.
A kind of uncomfortable spot
totally.
where they have to figure out what's the best avenue to get these files to the public. Their conservative base wants the files now. Thomas Massie and other people want the files now as well, but they want to make sure that victim stuff is redacted. So there's a lot of things that I think that's going through this. And I think the biggest thing that happened last week was Thomas Massie, the Republican from Kentucky, releasing his discharge petition.
Yeah.
And so, Lauren, you've been covering like so much of that, I think, and so have I. And I think everyone on the Hill is covering it right now. So I feel like everyone's going to be an expert by the end of this.
Yeah.
But you kind of have been in the thick of it. Like last week, you were at this really big presser. Why don't you tell people who, don't live on the Hill, don't even live in DC or Maryland or Virginia, what a discharge petition is, and then what kind of happened last week that kind of has brought this to the forefront of politics?
Yeah, I'm going to go back just a little bit. So this has been an issue that's been very long lasting in the media landscape now. Like we have a 24-hour media cycle a news cycle typically filters in and out, and this one has just like had such long-standing issues for the Republican Party. I think that they've kind of, in August recess, they said they were going to take August recess to see how they were going to deal with it, and we kind of came back and we're honestly in the exact same position as when we left in July.
It feels like Groundhog Day. I feel like we left and then we came back, and now it's just like, oh, it's the same crap, different day.
So a lot of people want Congress to vote on a forced release of the entirety of the Epstein files, obviously with survivors, like information redacted so that people don't come after them. I think that that's a large concern for a lot of the survivors. They were at a press conference last week that I attended. It was the biggest press conference that I've ever seen.
I think it was
outside
the biggest
the Hill.
press conference, at least in my couple years of just being on the Hill. I don't think I've ever seen that many protesters. I don't think I've ever seen just like the sheer size of people who were leading. Because like a lot of like members will, like sometimes we'll have press conferences where there's like 10 members or 12 members and they kind of cycle through and they say their pieces, and then it's our job to, chase after them. But I think literally there was like at least 40 people just there. I mean, you were there. Like how big was the crowd?
I mean, the crowd was big. There was a lot of protesters. There was media from different countries. Like there was media. The amount of media was the most I'd ever seen it. Like just it's called a house triangle. It's called the House Triangle. It's the little area where they do press conferences outside at the Capitol.
Sometimes in the blazing heat, which makes us uncomfortable, or in the frigid cold, which is also terrible.
But they're typically very small. Like it's typically a couple reporters, the lawmakers, and it's just like a camera photo op. Yeah. This one was massive, and there was one survivor who spoke out for the first time at this press conference about her experience with Jeffrey Epstein and kind of what happened there. And I just think that, first of all, the crowd size just goes to show how much people care about this issue. But the press conference was for Congressman Massie and Congressman Ro Khanna's bill. So they have a bill to force a release of the Epstein files, and Republicans don't want this bill because the White House does not want this bill to pass. And so they are doing this thing called a discharge petition, where if they get 218 signatures, then they can force the speaker to vote on the bill. Right now, they only need 6 Republicans to sign on if they get every Democrat, and there are 4 Republicans. It is Congressman Massie, Congresswoman Mace, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then
Lauren Boebert, I
yes,
think, right?
and then Lauren Boebert.
What an interesting thing, too, that I think a lot of people have pointed out to me is that not only are people like Nancy Mace, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Lauren Boebert, who are, they will say they are MAGA to the very end, they are Trump's biggest supporters, but they are coming out and saying, like, and even Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, has surprised a lot of people by it's not surprising to me that she's behind this issue. I feel like she's been someone who has been very vocal about wanting these things out, but a lot of people outside of DC just see Congresswoman Greene as this like firebrand who just loves Trump so much she'll do whatever he wants. This is a prime example that not just, public, like political parties in general, but Republicans are facing kind of this splintering over so many issues because the party is almost kind of like backtracking on itself in a lot of different areas. And I think the Jeffrey Epstein files is the biggest one right now.
Totally. And I mean, with the survivors coming to the Hill, they also met with House oversight and GOP leadership. I think that invoked a lot of emotions, and I don't know who else is going to sign on to the discharge petition. Congressman Massey said that he has those signatures and that he thinks that in the next 2 weeks that it will reach 218,
he's confident.
and then we'll force leadership to put it up for a vote. Whenever members are meeting with these survivors, like we saw Congresswoman Mace come out of the meeting crying. I talked to her a little bit about it after, and she also is a survivor of sexual assault and has spoke about it on the House floor. And so I think that just kind of, she told me that it hit home, obviously, when speaking to them, and she didn't really expect that emotional response. And so she kind of came out of that meeting a little bit early and was a little bit flustered, which I think a lot of people saw. The clip went viral.
The clip went viral, and I think anyone would feel that way. And I think, again, kind of going back to what you said, that this is such an issue that clearly with the crowd size, like it showed it mattered to a lot of people. It's one of the very few topics that I think I've gotten messages from friends or family who have asked me, what's the latest with the Epstein files, or what's going on the Hill about the Epstein files. I don't normally get a lot of those, and I think that just kind of shows that there are some things that are just so huge that it will break kind of the Beltway. It'll break the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia. We'll use that term a lot, DMV.
But it's also it's an issue that people understand. Like, we have things like government funding or the reconciliation bill. I didn't know what that was until I got to the Hill. Most people off the Hill don't know that is who or what that is, but most people know who Jeffrey Epstein is. So it's like an issue that is people can grasp and people care about, because like it is hard to watch these survivors speak out about what happened to them. Like it is something that has been like honestly hard to cover. Like listening to their stories is so sad that you're just covering this and like hearing it constantly. But the one thing that really stood out from the press conference was that a lot of the survivors are planning on making a list, and they don't necessarily want to release this list to the public, because if they do release this list, it is extremely rich, extremely powerful people who could sue them for defamation so easily.
And that's a big thing too, is that I think a lot of people are, and there was a reporter, I think, who said that last week at the press conference, where they said, if you know who the people are, why aren't you just saying their names right now? And what's so interesting about that is, like, that's a question that I think all reporters have. I mean, and it could be any topic. You're like, well, if you know, then why aren't you saying anything? But then you say it out loud and you're like, actually, like, imagine putting yourself in like the survivor's shoes. It is incredibly difficult to name those people, and I think that that is something that a lot of people don't realize, that this is such an issue that's going to impact the country, because it could connect so many different people, people that are in the media, people who maybe are the nicest people you've ever met. They could be a part of this, and you just don't know. And like you said, defamation, and those are some of the hardest cases in court to go to.
And I mean, if they are going up against the most rich, most powerful people in the country, like, these women are not going to be able to withstand that in court, just like sheer money-wise.
No.
And so
and the mental toll, too. That's like, and none of us can, journalists, even lawmakers, they don't understand what that's like. And so even though it seems like, it's just easy, just release the names, just like dump all the files out. Like, it is a very difficult task. And I think it's easy to sympathize with Republicans, because a lot of Republicans, James Comer, who chairs the Oversight Committee, he said, like, we want these files out. We just want to make sure we're meticulous, we're redacting. So I think, redacting victims' information, I think Thomas Massey and a lot of people just want it out much quicker than this process is going. Which, again, then on the other side, you sympathize and empathize with those people, because, it's been decades and there's no new information. So, time is of the essence for them.
With the list that they could possibly acquire, though, and write up, Congressman Massey and Congresswoman Green did say that they would read the list aloud on the House floor. And
Which is crazy. But also, I'm kind of looking forward to that, if that happens.
But it puts, so members on the House floor have constitutional immunity whenever they speak on the House floor, so they can't be sued for defamation for anything they say on the House floor. So it provides them and the survivors protection in reading that list and getting the list out. So that's a possibility. Obviously, the list has not been made yet. It's something that's hypothetical as of now, but it is something that the survivors want to do, and that kind of gives them a solution on how to get that list out. I talked to Congresswoman Mace about it last week, and she talked about having depositions with the victims to get the list, because that also provides them immunity in a deposition, because they have congressional immunity whenever they provide that to them in a deposition, which then allows them to go to the House floor and speak on it, and it provides all-around protection for the members, for the survivors, and I think that that's like the one solution that has really come to life last week. Oversight has a massive markup coming as well, so talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So this week is going to be a lot, and the weeks coming are going to be a lot. Yes, just the understatement of the year for sure.
Yes.
So a lot of what is going to be happening this week and in the weeks to come centers around the federalization of DC. And that is something that, along with the Epstein files, I think is something that everyone is talking about. And I think that when people watch our show, I think they are going to get a really good understanding of what is going on, because I'm going to break it all down for you.
It's really reached like same with the Epstein thing, like beyond the Beltway, which I don't think happens in our reporting that much. Like, people don't really pay attention to Congress outside of the Beltway super closely.
Super often. Like government funding maybe, but again, we've talked about that.
I don't get texts on a daily basis about any of the happenings in Congress from my friends across the country.
No.
Epstein and DC federalization, I've gotten texts every day about asking.
Every day. My mom's asking me every day, did you see the National Guard? Are they in your apartment? No, they are not in my apartment. They are outside my apartment, though.
Yes.
So I think kind of just to bring it back for people who maybe are not even really sure what's happening right now, the President Trump federalized the DC police force, and so that, takeover, in quotes, ends this week. And so when that happens, Congress will have to come together and pass a bill, a resolution, to extend that. And it could be for, like the original 30 days that President Trump did.
Yeah.
It could be 6 months. It could be a year. That seems dramatic. But, it could be really anything that they want to do that can get them the votes.
Which essentially is in place as a way for Congress to check the executive branch. Since, the branches are separate. Obviously, we have separation of powers. The executive branch only gets an allotted time to have this before Congress has to come in and either, enable it or, extend it for however long they want. So that's essentially why Congress has to act.
Yes, because, and the thing, though, that will benefit President Trump is, of course, the GOP trifecta. And so that, with Republicans and Democrats being so split on this issue, it really will come down to how hard Republicans want to fight this week, to pass this thing. And so coming up this week, House Oversight is doing a markup of 14 different bills, and they're all DC crime related. So some of them are related to juvenile crime, some of them are related to the council, some of them are related to crime policies that have been in place or repealed that they want to bring back. And there's a lot of different things that are going to be coming up. In separate of that, there is talks of a proposal coming up this week or in the weeks to come to extend this federal takeover. Yeah. And so that will be the key, is to see how Republicans want to approach this. Do they want to do another 30 days? Do they want to try to do it for months?
Do they want to do it for his entire presidency?
For his entire presidency, as we've heard some people talk about.
I talked to Ralph Norman last week, and I asked him how long he wants to see it, and he said the rest of President Trump's presidency, which I was kind of expecting a month, a year, and I was like,
3 years.
3 years. And he was like, yeah, 3 years.
He was like, yeah, absolutely. So I think it's very interesting that Republicans are, I won't say it's interesting. I think it's expected that Republicans are getting behind Trump on this. What I think is interesting is that when this is coming to the floor, Republicans will have to get something together that, again, I feel like we say this sentence every episode, that passes the Senate. The Senate does not have enough to meet that 60 vote threshold. And so they are going to need something that can maybe even get some Democrats on board. It has to get Democrats on board. And so I think that that's going to be their biggest trick, is trying to figure out which Democrats they can lobby. A lot of centrist purple states, they might be the most likely to sign on because, they are in a tough spot, re-election wise. And so that is something that we are anticipating this week, next week. Basically, September is going to be a big month for government funding, Jeffrey Epstein files, and DC federalization. So those are the three big things that I think, the big three that we'll be talking about at least for the rest of the month. Yeah. And so very interested to see how these DC crime bills get marked up. I think I'm going to maybe put out some speculation that we may see more bipartisanship potentially in these bills. It depends on which
we have
ones.
To, if they want anything passed.
If they want anything passed, I think Republicans will need to really work on that. But, however, most Democrats, if not all, are very united against Trump's takeover of D.C. So it is quite possible that Republicans will need every single vote from their own party to push us over the line, and Democrats might not give them an inch. I think it just will come down to what can Trump legally do what can Congress legally do to prevent it or to extend it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this is going to end up in court. And I think that we've seen that a lot from President Trump, where he has done a lot of things to overstep his authority in a really unprecedented way.
I mean, he's moving at lightning speed. I always like to explain reporting on a Trump presidency is that a presidency in like long terms is like a marathon.
Yes.
And he runs the marathon at a sprint pace.
All the time. I wake up in the morning and things are different. I wake up...
Like the amount of executive orders, the amount of just things that he does so quickly, I think that obviously ends up in the courts a lot, but he just does so much.
He does a lot, I think, to precede these court roads. I think he thinks, if I can push this out, I'm going to keep this going until the courts tell me not to.
Yes.
And so I think we're going to see the Supreme Court really get involved sooner, if not later, because they are going to need... At some point, somebody is going to say, okay, this is enough. Because let's say Congress doesn't extend this. President Trump has already said that he wants the National Guard through the end of the year, or sometimes more. And so can he legally do that?
Yeah.
Who's to say, really? I don't think we've ever really seen this level of unprecedented authority being used.
Yeah.
And so that'll be something, I think, to watch. And we'll see if Republicans stick behind that. I think that right now, again, Republicans are in this spot where Trump is the leader of their party, and it's very hard to go against them. And kind of like with the Jeffrey Epstein files, the White House has been whipping people against it. They've said it's a hostile act against us.
Yeah.
And Speaker Johnson has said that there's no daylight between the White House and the House. And so I think that right now everyone's just kind of on tiptoes. Like Trump moves, they move. And so I think it'll be very interesting to see. I can expect a DC federalization proposal to extend it for another 30 days, maybe more. I think long-term wise, it will be something to keep an eye on for the party, because it could come to a point where people are saying, okay, I think enough is enough, or I think that legally this is not working.
And I mean, also, I think that midterms are coming up in a little bit over a year. And like, depending on how it's polling for Republicans, like they're going to be fighting to keep the House and the Senate, because they both have like a decently slim majority in both. Even though they're on paper favored, I think that just like kind of a misstep in any direction that people take wrong could like kind of make or break the midterms for either party. So I think that they'll obviously be looking at that as well whenever they take into consideration how long this lasts.
Absolutely. And I think that we've already seen signs of them thinking long term to the midterms.
Yeah,
the Republicans last week had this meeting with the White House officials, and they talked about how they were finding that the big beautiful bill is not resonating with voters for several reasons, which I think are not hard to deduce. But
which is common, though, for a reconciliation bill, because it's so large.
It's so large. People don't know what it is.
People can't I mean, I had a hard time comprehending it.
Absolutely. And, like, the name of it. The name is the big, beautiful bill. And that tracks back. And that's just, like, the name is funny. I mean,
it's so Trump.
It's so Trump. It's Trump-coded, for sure. And I think it's so funny because that name tracks back to February, where he was upset that the Senate wanted to do 2 reconciliation bills. And he said, no, we must have one big beautiful bill in this. And it's so funny that he just said it, and it just became the name of this bill. It stuck. And so the thing is, though, is that you go tell, a voter in rural Iowa or even in California, they might not know what the big beautiful bill is. They think it's just this giant package that doesn't impact them. And so what White House officials have been telling Republicans is that you need to start rebranding it as the Working Families Tax Cut, or the Working Families Tax Cut Plan. And that was something that really happened last week when talking with Republicans. They said that they are concerned about a name change, just changing the name, and we've already started to see it on social media a little bit. They have said that they are concerned about changing the name because, it's only been 2 months, give or take, since the bill's passed, and we're already having to catch up and make work. I think that is a sign that Republicans do have their work cut out for them.
For sure.
But other Republicans have said that it's not really a rebranding. It's just telling people what the bill does. And people on Ways and Means Committee who helped create the tax portion of the bill, they've said we've always called it this. Like, it was called the One Big Beautiful Bill for marketing purposes, but it's always been a tax cut for working families. So I think what it really will come down to is constituents who are active and want to learn about the bill, and members being active and going into their districts.
And explaining it.
And on the flip side, for Democrats, that's going to be difficult for them, because now when Republicans are going into their districts, or going into their purple districts too, or into Democrat districts, calling it the Working Families Tax Cut Plan, Democrats now are going to have a harder time fighting back against it, because they have called the bill a ton of different names. The Big Ugly Bill. Another funny name. And they have said that, this is a tax cut for the rich and the rich only. This is killing your health care. This is killing Medicaid. But now when they're getting this working families moniker in there, the working families, the working class voting bloc that historically trended blue went away from them in the 2024 election. So for now Republicans to be saying, well, we're doing this tax cut for you, that kind of drives a wedge in Democratic messaging. Sure. And so that'll be something that I think we'll be very curious to hear from Democrats, how they're going to change their messaging tactics, because now they've kind of been given this opportunity to either really double down on what they've been saying, or do they need to start thinking about something new?
We are here today with Congresswoman Becca Balint, and we're going to be talking about a little bit what happened last week. Welcome to Capitol Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Very happy to be here.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you.
Yeah. So, obviously last week there was a lot that happened with Epstein. We saw the discharge petition be introduced. We saw the big press conference that took place on the Hill. Can you just talk to me a little bit about Democrats' perspective on the issue? Because obviously a lot of it is falling to Republicans with them having a trifecta, and how long lasting this issue has been.
Yeah, so look, for me, I always try to remind people that you have to put the victims at the center of this conversation. These survivors have wanted justice for a really long time. And when you look at Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction, and, just to remind everybody, okay, so this is Epstein's right-hand woman. She facilitated the trafficking, the abuse. She was convicted. Okay, I just want people to remind themselves of that, because all this information gets lost. And now you've got the Department of Justice and Trump giving her an opportunity to tell her side of the story. First of all, that's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous that she was moved to a lower security facility as a kind of favor to her. It's shocking that the president will not just come right out and say, I will not pardon her. He hasn't said that. So he's thinking of, the fact that he won't say that says to me that he is still considering this. And so when you put the victims at the center of this, it is so obvious what needs to happen. We need to listen to them. We need to let them tell their stories. We need to get all of the documents out. And that's what these Republicans ran on. It was literally one of the things they ran on. And that is true from the top on down. And for them to back away from it now it's just disgusting. There's really no other word for it. They are protecting people who abused girls, period.
And I think it's kind of interesting because we have seen such an interesting crop of people from the Republican side joining Democrats on this issue. I don't know how many times you would have thought in your time in Congress, oh, me and Marjorie Taylor Greene have a lot to agree on. I don't think a lot of people, because she's, the first person to say, I'm Trump's, supporter, I'm MAGA through and through. But on this issue, I think a lot of Democrats, and correct me if I'm wrong, how you're feeling about it. I think that her approach and her standing up and even calling out the Trump administration, I think is such an interesting twist that I wasn't expecting for this Congress.
Absolutely. And look, it takes courage to stand up to the Trump administration and to the MAGA movement when you are a member of Congress. And so I have to, and you're right, I disagree with her, with Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace on so many things, and they make me angry so much of the time. But the fact that it was those three and Massey, the only four, that's what I want people to know, the only four who were willing to stand with those victims and sign the discharge petition. And so, yeah, we always say politics makes for strange alliances, for sure. But look, what she said, what MTG said at the press conference was spot on. It really was. And the other thing that I always want to say to folks who ask me about this issue is Thomas Massey is doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. He knows who he is. He's not going to be bullied. And the fact that he's the only man in the Republican Party right now who will stand up for these victims, that tells you a lot about what you need to know about the Republican conference right now. And I do wish that it didn't fall to the women. And it sounds like The three of them have had some experience with abuse of some, whether it was verbal or physical or sexual. Is that what it takes? Do you have to actually have had that trauma to be able to understand that we have a responsibility to stand up for victims? Like, I get so frustrated with Republican men when they say, oh, well, it could be my daughter, it could be my wife. No, I need you to think about this could be you or this could be your constituent. And that's the frame.
Mm-hmm.
That's the frame. And so, we're not going to let the issue go, and nor should we. And we were just chatting, some members of the judiciary, certainly the oversight committee has a role to play here. We just learned on the spur of the moment in committee the other day, because he did not tell us, that Chairman Jordan, Jim Jordan, chair of the committee, judiciary, said that he was going to have Kash Patel and Pam Bondi come in. We never received a notification about that. Let's talk about transparency and full disclosure. But we have a role to play here in getting this out. And they made this issue a center point of their campaigns, and we're going to hold them to it. Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit, and this is kind of going just to a more broad topic, but what you just said in committee hearings, you're going to be hearing from these two powerful people in the administration. I feel like a lot of people don't really know what committee hearings are. They see clips on Twitter, they see clips on Instagram, but what is the purpose of these committee hearings other than clips? Because I feel like that's questions that like Lauren and I get a lot. If they see 45-minute clips and they're like, do the hearings actually do anything? Is there anything that comes out of it? And from your perspective, kind of what do you think are the purpose of these hearings, and how do you make them count?
Yeah, Rachel, this is the crux. It's such a good question, because I get that too. Look, cable news and social media has fundamentally changed the role of the committees. It has. And let's just name it, because it's true. And so those of us who came up through the state legislatures, we see committees really differently at the state level. You're actually engaging in conversations to elicit, whether it's bipartisan bills or really looking at the heart of a problem and how we solve it. What has evolved on Capitol Hill is these very high stakes hearings in which everybody is trying to make a point very publicly. And, if we see it through the most charitable light, people are trying to use it to give voice to the voiceless, the people who can't be in that committee hearing, right? And then there are some of my colleagues who see it just as an opportunity for self-promotion, period. Let's just name it. That is happening. But in the case of Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, you're right. So many people have no idea who these people are, right? I mean, the three of us on here, we are political geeks. That's why you are in the jobs that you're in. That's why I'm in the job I'm in. But the vast majority of Americans are not, right? They're casual consumers of politics. And so what I always think about when I go into committee, how do I make this count for the people that I represent? What would they want me to be asking if they got to be in the room, right? What are the things that are really frustrating them that they want somebody to name? Also, it is about pointing out patent hypocrisy and corruption, and is an opportunity. This is the piece that I want your viewers or listeners to understand is, when you speak in front of a congressional committee, you take an oath that you are going to tell the truth, right? So it is on the record. You are swearing an oath to tell the truth. That, people don't do that every day when they're posting on their phones, right? So the stakes are higher. And, I don't have a lot of faith that we're going to get straight answers from either of these people, especially, and I said this on an interview last week, especially when the person running the committee is Chair Jordan, who also has a dark cloud hanging over his head about what happened when he was a wrestling coach back in Ohio. And the victims that are now coming forward, I'm not accusing him of sexual abuse, just to be clear, but it's not clear who knew what on that coaching staff. So this is the man who's going to try to protect victims when you have victims in Ohio saying that Chair Jordan, when he was a wrestling coach, didn't do enough to protect them. Like, it's hard to have confidence in the process. But I hope to at least nail them down on the things that they have said that have been completely inconsistent with other things that they have said, right? So in the case of Pam Bondi, the AG, she said, we have a list. We're going to release the list. I got the list right here. Here are the lists. Here are the binders. And then all of a sudden, she says there's no list. So which is the truth of it? And we can't let that stuff go. But it's a great question. What are the purposes, of the hearings as it exists right now?
Yeah. So you just brought up this hypothetical list that Attorney General Pam Bondi has talked about having. At the press conference, you also talked about how Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments, like you said, in your eyes were spot on. I don't know if you heard one of the victims bring up a potential list that they could make.
Yes.
Essentially be the list that the DOJ should have in their eyes, and it would be compiled by them. But if they were to release the list, they would face mass amounts of lawsuits. They would, as Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie put in, be sued into poverty, their words. And so Congresswoman Greene said that she would bring it to the floor and read the list aloud there, so that she's granted constitutional immunity under.
I didn't see that part of it.
Under the speech
That's really interesting.
And then I followed up with Congresswoman Mace after that last week, and she said that she's talked a little bit to House leadership about bringing in those survivors for depositions, so that they can give the list under a deposition, and then they're also protected.
Yes.
Is something, obviously, I think that Democrats are kind of rallying behind anything that Massie is looking to do to get this across the finish line. Is that something that you see Democrats really rallying behind them on?
Yeah, really great question. That was the first, I'm learning about this in real time, so I didn't have an opportunity to watch the whole press conference. But certainly, we have to use every tool that we have at our disposal to give these, some people want to say victims or survivors. I want to use the language that's comfortable for them. These women that have been through a horrific traumatic experience so that they have an opportunity to have their information heard in a format that does justice to the story they're telling, and they're not wrong. They will be sued into poverty. And so here's another piece of this. So a simple answer to your question, yes, I think we will look at this. How can we support? How can we actually work together on this? The other piece is, who's the Speaker of the House right now? A man who claims to be a man of faith. A man who is beating up on queer and trans people all the livelong day, saying he's trying to protect women and girls. Here is a really straightforward, clear-cut way this man can live the values that he claims to espouse, which is these Christian values. And he is right now using his office to protect the powerful. He is not using his office to protect women and girls. And I wish he would be called on it more. How can you call yourself a person of faith or someone who's always preaching about morality and religion when you are using your office to protect people who have abused girls in the most vulnerable times in their lives?
And I think it's interesting because Republicans are in this very difficult position, and I think that regardless of whether you can argue from either side whether they, it's self-inflicted or whatnot, I think it is interesting over the last year and even a couple of years to see the ways that Republicans have had to either take a couple steps back or they've had to double down on things that don't necessarily match up with things that they've said. And I think the Epstein files is one of those things that we've seen where they said stuff in campaigns, and President Trump, either himself or his allies or his vice president, they said they want these files released. Now there's this kind of government pushback, which I think had they been a lot more upfront about the process and the nitty-grittiness of it that comes from releasing the files, maybe their MAGA base wouldn't have been so eager to just see it outright. But I think kind of what we've been seeing, and I wonder if you agree, is that Republicans have been kind of rebranding a lot of different things. Like this last week, we saw Republicans rebranding on the big beautiful bill. That was something that was a moniker that came out, as early as February from Trump, and now it's something called the Working Families Tax Cut. I wanted to get your reaction to that rebranding and whether you think it's a trend that we've seen in kind of a growingly partisan Congress.
Yeah, look, it was always a stupid moniker for that bill. It was always asinine. They always sounded ridiculous when they said it. They sounded like they were in North Korea or Russia, like parroting the line of their leader. So it was always a really stupid way to talk about that bill because the American public is not stupid. And from the moment that they started talking about that, I thought, well, this is going to backfire because when people find out what's in it, they're going to be like, you're full of crap, right? So we have been successful, and I mean, Democrats have been successful through that process of the vote, starting with what was going on in the Budget Committee, and I serve on the Budget Committee, really highlighting what is this going to mean when you suck $900 billion out of healthcare. That's going to impact the whole system when you're taking food away, like who benefits, who doesn't. And I think we have been disciplined in a way sometimes Democrats are not. And we, this summer, heading into the August recess, many of us, no, I should say we got 100% of the caucus held events related to explaining what was in the bill and what was not. And so we saw these cracks even before the rebrand. Okay. So you had Josh Hawley in the days after the vote saying, oh gosh, well, I really didn't want to do anything to hurt Medicaid. You had a list of Republicans who were like trying to backtrack on what they've done. And so it doesn't surprise me that they're trying to rebrand it, but I don't think it's going to work. I think the damage has been done. People understand that this benefits the very wealthy and it actually screws over everybody else. And it's going to be too little too late on the rebrand. But I think we're going to see more of this because what they're pushing is not popular. And I'll give you an example. So when I talk to young men who either, and these are folks in Vermont, who either voted for Trump or decided not to vote because like they, were nominally Democrats, but they just didn't feel good about the race up through Biden and then Kamala for lots of reasons. But a couple things that they narrowed in on for me is, look, this party and Trump promised us no more wars. Like for a lot of them who are thinking about, well, I have to go to war someday. They're like, that was one of our number one issues. And now they're not following through on that. For other people, they said they were going to lower costs. They're absolutely not doing that. And so they're going to have to face the music on the fact that they are not doing the things they said they were going to do on day one, right? And instead have doubled down, I think, on the most craven and most, I think, cruel aspects of the MAGA movement that I think a lot of people are not comfortable with. I think they're overplaying their hand on that.
And heading into 2026, you kind of just touch on this, that some people in the Democratic Party who either were registered or they were not conservative, they were not loving what they saw in 2024. And obviously Democrats didn't have the best year. We've talked about that before. It's just obvious.
Yes. No, we had a terrible year. And I don't care how you frame it when people are like, well, we actually did better. We could have lost more. Give me a break. Give me a break. We lost the trifecta. Do not. No.
Yeah.
No.
And so moving into 2026 and even 2025, but mainly 2026, what are some opportunities that you think Democrats should be taking advantage of that they didn't in 2024? Like we've seen, and some people are taking the approach of stepping down. We've seen Jerry Nadler, he recently announced retirement. And so that's going to open a floodgate for potentially a new blood. What are some things that Democrats should be doing because a lot of people are, while they're not happy with Republicans, they're not loving the bill and they're not loving, inflation. A lot of people are still upset with Democrats for the things that they did under Biden's presidency when they were in control of the Senate, things like that.
Yeah.
So what do you think that Democrats need to do to earn people's trust back in a way that they're actually going to respond to? Because some people say that they have ideas and they're not sticking. So what do you think is the best way?
Okay. So first and foremost, and I said this even right after the election, we have to be fearless in our humility and look at what we've screwed up, okay? And not sugarcoat it and not turn away and not paper over it. And so before I get to like issues, I want to talk about how we as Democrats, I believe, need to show up for people. And I've got a couple mantras that go through my head to remind me of these things. So the first thing is I need to speak to be understood. I need to listen to understand it. What I mean by that is we need to use plain language, pure and simple. We need to stop the lingo. We need to stop showing up as if we're the smartest people in the room. We're Democrats. We're going to do the footnotes. We're going to have the details on the plans. Fine. Don't lead with the details. We have to lead with the headlines, and then we're going to, over time, flesh it out. But, there's that saying that Republicans campaign in headlines, we campaign in footnotes. We can't do that anymore. We can't, because the attention span has changed on all of us, right? So that's a given. 52% of the population right now in America reads at a 5th or 6th grade reading level. 52%. Yeah, I just saw your eyes get wide. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
And another big swath reads at about a 7th or 8th grade reading level. Now, we can talk about why that is, and we can be upset about it. I'm a former teacher. Certainly that hurts my heart, but that's the reality. So if that's the reality, then language like really, really matters. And so I have really been in earnest looking at the emails that I send out to constituents, the words that I'm using when I'm in town halls, what I'm using in one-on-one meetings. It should be accessible language that is not full of a lot of catchwords, catchphrases, the in-group, out-group. We need to stop that because it doesn't make people feel included. In terms of like how we're showing up, I keep saying this to myself, we need warriors and empaths. We need both. It's not one or the other, okay? Yeah, we need, as members on the Democratic side, to be willing to punch back, to throw elbows, like go toe-to-toe, but not only that, because the other thing that voters told us, the ones in the middle and also Democratic voters who didn't show up to vote said, I don't feel like Democrats are listening deeply to my needs, my family's needs, my financial needs. The healthcare is, I'm drowning in these bills. I don't know how my kid's going to afford a home in my home state when they grow up. All of those things. We can't keep saying, well, we had a better recovery in the United States than any other Western nation. Who cares? What American cares about that? Yes, it's true. I serve on the budget committee. I've seen the data. Americans' recovery is better. Doesn't matter if you don't feel that. And then in terms of doing both of those things, what is it that we need to campaign on? I think we absolutely need to campaign on healthcare, like true and real healthcare reform. People are enraged, and rightly so, at the amount of money that is getting fleeced from Americans, and it is not going to actually making us healthier. So healthcare, there's also some monopolistic things going on within healthcare that I think we need to address in the Judiciary Committee. I think so. We also have to build more housing, period. We have to make it easier to build more housing. We need to invest in that. In the 50s and 60s, there was a decision made at the federal government that we're going to invest in homes that people could afford, and they built out the suburbs. And that didn't just happen. That was a concerted effort to build that infrastructure. We need to do that again. But we have to go back to the basics of what people brought us to the Democratic Party to begin with. We are and have been the party of working people. We still are in terms of our values and the issues that we put forward. But we need to build that trust again, to your point. We have to show up in a way that is ready to fight, also listening and not acting like we have all the answers. We need to listen first and talk second. So those are the things that I'm thinking about. And certainly there are more issue. Oh, there's one other. There's one other that I've been thinking about a lot. We cannot cede the ground on safety and security. We can't. The way they're framing it is so profoundly screwed up. Like, no, we're not safer when you send in the National Guard. We're not safer when ICE comes and bashes in people's windows. But Americans do want to feel a sense of safety and security in their homes, in their communities. How do we do that? Well, we do it by making sure they have health care, that they have housing, that they feel like their kids have an opportunity. But we can't just pretend like we don't have to talk about that stuff. And I always use the example of when my house got broken into, I was in the state legislature and it got, somebody broke the window, climbed in my house. They left footprints in my kids' rooms as they were like rifling through everything. That stuff goes to the heart of who we are as parents. And if we don't acknowledge that that is just how we all think about our own lives, then I think we're going to continue to lose people. We can't ignore it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Welcome to our Q&A section where we're going to be answering 3 questions from our audience, from our followers. Favorite. And so the first question that we have is from our friend Anna, and she is asking, what is getting coffee with people? Do you actually drink coffee?
No.
No.
The answer is no.
The answer is no.
The first few times whenever I came to the Hill, I feel like I've never just I do this with friends now because I do it so much on the Hill. I hang out with my friends outside of the Hill and I'm like, do you want to get coffee? Which isn't that weird, but in DC it's such a thing. To me it's so normalized.
I didn't know what it was when I
don't
came
remember
from college. I thought that getting coffee was going to Dunkin' and getting coffee.
Yeah. On the Hill, you get coffee and you just meet somewhere and talk about work.
Yeah. I remember when I first came to the Hill and I was getting coffee with people, I got there early to get a coffee. And then I could sit there with my coffee. And then the girl or the guy would show up with their notebook and have no coffee. And then I looked like an idiot. And I was like, oh, are we not drinking coffee?
Yeah.
I didn't want to say that because why would you say that to somebody?
Yeah.
And so then finally you just do more and more of them and you realize, the getting coffee is actually just code for let's meet up and source talk.
And talk about work.
Yes, and talk about work.
So you'll sit down at this coffee. Sometimes
kind of like this.
Yes.
You sit like this, you're across from each other.
Sometimes you will get coffee. There have been times where I have gotten coffee.
Or you show up with your coffee and there's this much left and that's your coffee.
And some people do actually want to get coffee. It's kind of give and take. But you sit down, you chit chat for a little bit and then they'll be like, what can I do for you?
Literally. You'll talk about how was your weekend? What did you do over the breaks? And then they'll be like, we have a bill coming up. Or if it's us, if we want the coffee, we're like, hey, we're hearing this, this, and that. Can you give me, anything on background or off the record? Which I guess to explain that, background versus off the record. Background is where you have information, you can quote them as a House Republican said, or
a source familiar,
or a House Democratic staffer told us. Whereas off the record, you cannot use it, you cannot print it. And it's one of those things where it really is an ethical guessing game.
They kind of just take your word for it.
You take your word for it.
But if you were to ever burn them, you don't have that source anymore.
No.
They are not going to trust you, or they're not. If they give me information off the record, I report on it, or they give me information on background, I put their name behind it. They're not going to trust me again to give me information, so I'm not going to be able to get what I need. It's just kind of like a trusting relationship that you have with them.
Absolutely.
So these coffees are essentially how we write our stories.
They're how we write our stories, and that's how we find out information. We're like, we're on background from a staffer. They'll tell us, off the record, this person and that person got into a fight over this bill, so it's not coming to the floor next week.
Yeah.
So even though we can't report this juicy news that somebody got into a fight,
yes,
we know for our planning purposes, bill that we were going to have to write up, we don't have to anymore.
And also a lot of times, somebody will tell us something off the record, and it is helpful to have that knowledge, because I'm not going to go and spread that knowledge, but if I know that somebody tells me that a bill is coming off the record, I can you can kind of maneuver it to where you ask other members hey, what's coming up in this area? And then maybe the member will happen to give it to you on the record or on background. So it kind of just gives you information on where to go look for stories.
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of the times with members, when they're coming in and out, it's very quick. We have to ask them a question
seconds.
super fast when they are coming to vote, when they're leaving. And I think the busiest days that we've ever had are like Mondays and Fridays or Mondays and Thursdays. And so we have a question
Yes.
from another one
Kendall.
of our friends.
She asked, what are fly-in and what are fly-out days?
Oh my gosh. So fly-in days is when members fly in from home. And a lot of that time it's on a Monday. So a Monday they have 6:30 p.m. votes. And that is considered the fly-in day. It's the first vote day of this week.
Every fly-in day, votes are at 6:30. So
yes,
whether it's a Monday or if it's a holiday week and they fly in on a Tuesday, Rachel and I will be at work till 9.
We will be at work till 9 p.m.
Yes.
And so basically they come in all morning. Usually the floor for the House opens around like noon or 2. And so that's when some members come in and talk. But the majority of the members will not be on Capitol Hill until 6:30 p.m. And so that can make for a long day for us. And then fly out days are the days that they fly home to their districts, or in some cases if they live, nearby states, they drive home.
Like last week on Thursday, there was a 10 a.m. vote, and we had about 30 minutes to get everything we needed for stories on Friday, and then we do what is called a weekender story. So we write a story on Fridays, and then they have more shelf life. Like they won't
They're not
be
super
not
timely.
newsy by the end of Friday, and so they run on the weekend so that we have content come out. So not only do we have to get stuff for our stories on Thursday, we also have to get stuff for our stories on Friday and stuff for our weekend stories.
Yep.
So we have this miniature window on a fly-out day to get all of this information.
And then our final question is from a listener, Ireland. And she said, as someone who is not on the Hill, what is the best way to stay in the loop on the happenings? Well, to be biased, watch our show.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it. In general, keep up to date with news. For us, washingtonexaminer.com is where we put out all of our stories. YouTube, we have a lot of videos and shows just like this one. And people get news from all sorts of places. They can get it from X, they can get it from Blue Sky, they can get it from, the Apple News app. Like there's a lot of different ways, but I think a lot of it, at least for us when we're doing our stories,
we get them from X
mostly, because that's just the fastest thing. And I think that the best thing too is that people should get their news from multiple sources. We do.
Totally.
Like we do this show, right? And we want everyone to watch our show and we want to be the top in the biz. But also we would be bad journalists if we didn't go listen to other shows and other podcasts.
Totally.
And again, like do those quick 15-minute ones. Like I get my news from CNN and Fox. I get my stuff from X and I actually go on people's websites. So being super involved and going to a lot of different sources I think is the best way. But in our completely unbiased opinion, you should watch our show.
Yes. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching Capitol Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
And make sure that you like and subscribe. Please send us questions. We would love to hear from you. And please visit us at washingtonexaminer.com.